I desperately need to make this video. It's about my biological father. Okay, so this is some new information that I just found out about my biological father. Michaela, you're probably going to want to know this. I already made this video about the topics of my biological father being two houses down, right next door to my sister that died. And she lived two houses down. She lived right next door, then the next door over to her house, where I don't know if they're even blood related. To my understand, they're not blood related because my mother told me, but because when I was a kid, my mother used to vaguely talk about them, and I remember her actions and her emotions and how she expressed them. So that's how I knew whether they were good people or not, or they could be trusted, or just don't bother them, don't mess with them. So I know that there was an elder lady, like Mexican lady, and I don't think she knew how to speak English. I mean, Spanish, maybe just a little bit, but she was very Americanized, very formal speaking, kind of heavy set a little bit. I don't even know if she's still alive. She was already like 65, 7 years old when I saw her, but she looked very healthy, at least when I saw her. And but I talk about that, my biological father. Now, the reason I even confirm even more that I believe this is my biological father, that what I saw over there when I was a kid, was I want to say I was standing on the front porch and he saw me. Like, and I was staring at this guy, and remember, I don't know how little kids, if they've never seen their biological father and looks at a guy that looks a lot like them, they feel comfortable, because it's very common. If you see little babies, they'll and have you ever seen a black person, they get scared, or there's something frightening about the male. Usually it happens with babies sometimes. So but I do remember, looking over that direction, and it was two houses down, and they were sort of on the driveway, on the sidewalk, talking to each other, talking to this guy, and he was kind of a heavy set Mexican guy, and he looked like my biological father as well, but he was short and he was chubby, kind of had like chubby kind of to him. And the reason I say that, I think, okay, let me get to this, like I was going to get to before, why I think this is my mother. When I was a kid, my mother would tell me, and she didn't tell me this was my biological father. She just knew. She said, "Oh, sabes ese señor que vive ahí está estudiando para manejar trocas," meaning the guy over there. My mother told me that guy had a really good job and he was studying. She told me in a different time that guy was making really good money. He'd been working for a company for a very long time. But my mother told me, I remember she was cooking, that he was studying to drive 18-wheelers. And that's exactly what my biological father, I think, was doing. Now, you got to understand, no one has ever told me whether my biological father, Hector, was Michaela's father, our biological father, was, you know, no information was ever really said anything about him. And the only reason I confirm this, because I talk about that when I was 25 years old and I was working for Advanced Graphics Online, and I was getting all these tickets, and Gary Gwynn and Mike Standish and all these people were swarming me with this information about my mother and the house, and they were parasitically victimizing me when I was very young. And this is the place where I got like 40 fucking tickets nearly. So anyway, when I'm working there, there was a guy talk about that they kept on bringing up a guy, saying that there was a guy that used to drive 18-wheelers, and he's been to prison before. Oh, he was studying the 18-wheelers, and he was homeless. And so they kept on using hypothetical situations, referencing. So you got to understand, at that time and moment, I have no idea to even think that I have a different biological father. I think Raymond Palomo is my biological father the entire time. There's no reason for me not to believe that. So if it turns out that he did go to prison, he was living in his car homeless, and he was studying to be 18-wheelers, and he did have a heart attack. Bingo. Because those are exact same things that they said at that company. But they kept on scumming this guy. And he worked by himself. And he said that yeah, the guy worked over there for 20 years. Yeah, that guy's been working over here for 20 years. And I remember that that's what they kept on telling me. Monica, Gary, and this other guy. I don't think the other guy's alive anymore. He is a prior cancer patient as well. He was like a Native American Indian looking guy. And they just kept on scumming that guy. I don't know. I never worked with him. I maybe seen him once, but he worked from a far distance from me, and I worked inside, like the sort of laboratory printing area, and he worked outside on the t-shirts. But they always, I just knew that that guy was always being scummed. Like he was leftovers, and I don't know why. I didn't hate the guy. I didn't know who he was. For some reason, I didn't understand why they kept on, oh, you know that guy, right? He was homeless. Yeah, you know that guy. So that's all I need to know. If my biological father was homeless, sleeping in his car, driving 18 wheelers, he had a heart attack within that period of time, and he went to prison for a little while. Bingo, that's why. Now, I had no idea at this time, but you got to understand this is what people are persecuting me about, okay? This is how I know they went after him. So I say it's Michaela because I don't know if he's still alive or what his health conditions are. I don't. I have strong reason to believe he's not alive anymore. There's been too many people that have scummed him in my life, even to this very day, and about you, Michaela, to make me think that he's still alive. Because for every man on this planet that is a decent human being, having sons and daughters, having a daughter, let alone a very beautiful looking daughter, everyone's beautiful, right? But when you have a very beautiful looking daughter, it is the most precious, prized possession a man can ever have, is having a daughter. You know, boys are kind of like boys, but when you have a daughter, it's the man always has to protect them, you know, because the predators, you know. So the reason I say this is because my mother told me when I was about 10 years old. Was like 10, maybe 8. I was maybe younger than 10. I was like 9 or 10, no older than 10. I was saying 8 to 9 years old, anywhere from 8 to 10 years old. And she said that guy, she said, ¿sabes si estás estudiando para manejar 18 wheelers y manejar mucho dinero? So I knew my mother's expression and what she meant. So when she gave an expression, I knew immediately how well, because the communication between me and my mother and how she said things was very I want to say it's not as common as it was with other people, other mothers, because I've been somewhere around some other people's mothers, and given the fact that my mother was so poorly educated and so much suffering, the communication of how and opinions of others were delivered different. But anyway, told me that guy, if she I remember her washing dishes or something, and she said, and she was like, yeah, ese señor. He go, no, no, yeah, no, no, you know. So she would kind of play into her own emotional roles, and she would be cooking and washing. He goes, no, 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 yeah, no. And she'd be sitting on the casilla, ese señor va manejar para 18 wheelers. Yeah, yeah. Like she's given an agreement. It's like, yeah, he's doing good or something. So I very strongly even now confirm to even believe even more that my biological father, the way that my parents got to know each other, Hector and Celestina Melendez Palomo, my mother, the way they met was that guy introduced, or he saw my mother and he came and talked to my mother. But that guy, my biological father, worked with that guy because he was hanging around that guy. And when I saw that guy one day, I had no earthly idea, and he just looked at me and goes, yeah, like, and he was just kind of like, not like mad, like saying yeah, but like confirming, like, yeah, like, you know, uh, she wants, if that's what Celestina wants, that's kind of how I interpret it, because I used to always see this guy. He used to always take his lunch with him, and I used to always see him bring this sort of lunch bag, or always carry it to work and coming home from work. So when he came home from work, I remember seeing this all the time. So this is going to be able to confirm to you that guy, my biological father, used to work with that guy or was friends with that guy because he was. You wouldn't be hanging out on the front porch in a car, hanging out if you weren't friends with the person, especially at your residence. I don't know. It was in the '80s when this happened, but that's what it was. And I know this sounds kind of awful, but I remember looking at him one time, and he saw me, and he just looked, and I was just it just I know it sounds kind of weird how maybe a child understands how a biological father and a biological son can have some sort of spiritual instinct that's his offspring, just like puppies, just like the animal kingdom and lions and tigers and shit, and even if you're not interested, there's a recognition of that. So I wouldn't know. But I remember looking at him, and he looked at me and was just talking, and I don't know if he went into the house or he came back later that day or what it was, or my mother was standing outside, or I happened to be, I don't remember, but I want to say, for whatever reason, how it ever happened, I want to say I saw him, but I'm not as sure exactly on this, but I saw him over there. And when I did see him, he was talking to that guy, and they were just chilling and talking. But my mother had no communication with this guy. Like the guy that lived there, the guy that lived there, which was like the uncle or something, he had he never went to our house. He never gave problems. He was just the guy that lived there paying rent to the lady that lived there. That was it. He went to work every single day and kind of stuck to himself. Didn't have kids, family, just did his own thing in life. But other than that, when I saw this guy, we had no communication. So when my mother got information from like them, somehow I don't know how she got it, which is very questionable. But I don't know how she got that information. But I think it's important for me to talk about that guy. That means that girl that passed away, because Robert Zarate, the one who died in the car wreck, there's a whole sort of entanglement that caused because he found out that I knew that he slept with her or he was going to her house secretly, didn't say anything, and I remember just thinking Robert had maybe said something to me, and I was cool with it because I had known Robert for so long, and we were best friends at that time, and you know they were basically the same age, and you know she was a very pretty girl, and she had somehow invited him. So there wasn't, but there's always this edge of like, people would ward off when they knew that if there was a guy over there, that I would be warding sort of because I was involved around a lot of people. And it's one of the things I didn't want to get involved over there because I knew that I was doing drugs at the time, experimenting with drugs, and I was around particular people that could bring a lot of toxic shit. And I knew she was like the schoolgirl, Catholic schoolgirl that went to school and very pretty. You probably don't want to mess around the people that I'm around with. So anyway, but that guy was involved with my biological father. So he had to know. And the thing is that lady, that old lady, to my understanding, she's like the cousin, or I don't know, because people say they're cousins and they're not really blood related. But to some understanding, she was related. It was either that old lady or someone in that house was related, a distant relative of my dad's first wife. There were distant relatives. They were like a second cousin or some shit like that. That's what my mother told me. But I think it's important for me to talk about. Michaela would probably want to know that. But I do remember my mother. My mother would have not told me that guy was studying, the reason she said that guy and not my biological father, I had a different biological father because that's how she interpreted things. So when my mother talks about my biological father, she talks about this circumstances as referencing my biological father. Like, yeah, that guy over there, he's studying to drive 18-wheelers. So when my father was studying to do 18-wheelers, my mom knew about it because it was, I don't know how much Michaela's mother and my mother were communicating. But I do know, and I talked about this. We went to Albertsons where I saw Barack Obama, where he kind of scolded me when I was there. But it was at the same location where I saw my biological father. My mom and Michaela's mother set this up and pissed off my biological father. And they really kind of pissed him off. And anyway, this was many years ago. And I say this because I think it's important for me to talk about, because she had come over to our house and she had called a couple of times. And I don't know how she got. My mom eventually just severed the communication. She was like, no, it's okay. You know, my mother just kind of did her own thing. But I don't know how information could have known that my mother, that, you know, what my biological father was doing. But I want to say she was. And I'm 100% on that. She would have not been telling me this guy because she knew that this guy, and I don't know if she said if this guy was gay. Because my mother had a habit of telling me who was gay and who wasn't, sometimes. Or if a guy was sort of pedophile and you just have to get away from him because he may want to touch you or some shit. My mother would say shit like that. You know, obviously, you know, I'm a cute little kid and be protective. Obviously, she could only do so much, obviously, what was happening to Frankie. But I think it's important for me to talk about, for Michaela to know, you know, this is a long time ago. And far as I know, my biological father, I don't think he's alive anymore. And in the world that I live in, and what everything that's going on, I'm not putting on videotape about what's happening at this house, what some of the residents are doing, what's happening in so many circumstances. The way I see it is, most of all of it is, it's all forfeited. They make up stories. They're gonna say whatever they want, and they're gonna get everything they want, and they're gonna do it by force. If they tell you that, you know, a dog's a cat, and then a dog's gonna be a cat, no matter what, and they're gonna beat my ass until that's what they say, and regardless, and they'll brainwash me. They'll beat me with these electronic devices and keep going and going, and it's never gonna stop. But as far as that goes, she knew my biological father was studying to drive an 18-wheeler. So I thought I would say something about this because you know, girls are always attached to their father. Always. Always, you know, especially the guy. So I think it's important, Michaela, for you to know, because they went after our biological father, and it was your father. Even though I was raised by a different dad, they went after that guy. They went after his throat, and they went after his asshole. They to scum him in every way that you can imagine, and they're still doing it to this very single minute today, and they know how to do it. And there's nothing that I can do about this. They're being permitted, they're being allowed, they're recording me, they're beating me with electronic devices. It's not going to stop. They know how, as I'm speaking about something, how to believe and continue with that sort of belief of a story of what they want. And if they don't like it, they beat me again for it, dissembling me. So, but as far as I know, I don't think he's alive anymore. But I do know that you would probably want to know that. You know, everything is gone and passed by. Everything has. It's really too late for any of it. So, but that's wild. That's some new information, is to think that was my biological father. I had no idea that guy lived there. You know, I mean, the guy that lived there would work with my biological father, because I think that's how they met. I had no idea, earthly idea, to how my biological father could have met my mother. I still to this day don't know. I thought maybe it was like, you know, at a grocery store and got her number and they went to a hotel or something like that. But no, they met each other because that was my biological father, and they happened to connect, you know, attention toward one another, and he wanted to say hello. So, anyway, I thought I would say something to whatever the circumstances is. You never know. So I figured I'd say something to have the others fix it, because everything's on their table. They take what they want. They're going to make up stories. They're going to say whatever they want. They're going to steal everything. The President of the United States is involved, everything's theirs. Period. And look at who got the shit life and look who got the glory life. You'll never know, right?